Our last speaker is Francisco Zamora-Arroyo, who is project manager of the Colorado River Delta project for the Sonoran Institute, who will talk about this last issue, Colorado River integrated management south of the border.
Thank you. I want to thank all the organizers for the invitation to be here. I have to be honest, when they invited me like 4 or 5 months ago, and I see the word like law school or law center, I said, well, I'm not a lawyer. So, and I just want to thank you because you kind of accepted my suggestion about presenting something on restoration in the Delta. So that's what I like to speak today about some of the restoration work that we have been doing in the Delta. And I call it from theory to practice because you hear about restoration a lot, but in the Delta is perhaps pretty new or pretty recent in the last 4 or 5 years that we have been doing on-the-ground restoration. And with limited resources. I mean, you'll see some of these a lot of pictures that I want to show you. We have been doing this with limited resources. Well, this is the outline for the presentation. Some of these, Jennifer presented some of these ideas already, the conservation priority areas. I'll show a map showing the 15 conservation priorities areas, and then move into more of the on-the-ground restoration and the land and land policy and water policy that is needed to complement on-the-ground restoration actions. And then I just finalize with some conclusions about the future of the Delta. Some of you know me and you know that I'm optimistic. So I think it's a great future for the Delta if we all work together to conserve the Delta. So two main things I want to leave with you today. Restoration of the Delta is feasible and it's cost effective. You can go from plans, drawings to on-the-ground restoration. So that's kind of the first message I want to give with you. The second message is, okay, we can do that, but we need some water. I mean, we don't need a lot of water, but we need some water, and I'll give more details about that. But we need a lot of collaboration at different levels. And I want to emphasize also that we need a solid community-based foundation for conservation and restoration. And of course, we need proper management, because if we want to restore these areas, we want to keep these areas in good conditions. So, I want to just mention something about Sonoran Institute. We are a non-profit organization working on kind of Western North America, including Northwest Mexico. In the Delta, we have been working there for almost 10 years. Well, actually 10 years, since 1997. And we do have an office in Mexicali. Okay, this is that map again. The report, by the way, I have a few copies here. And if you want a copy, you can send me an email, or Jennifer has more copies too, so you can just send us email. And if you need a hard copy, we can send you one. Some of you actually were part of that report in a workshop we did in Tijuana in 2002. I want to show you this slide just to highlight the importance of the Delta. Many of you know about the Pacific Flyway, and of course the Delta is an important stopover site along that Pacific Flyway. Something else I want to emphasize is not only birds that are Mexican birds. I mean, are birds that are travel to the U.S. and Canada and come back. So we want to keep that in mind. What is that? Okay. Some of you know also Hinojosa has done a lot of work on birds in the Delta, has identified at least 360 species. I mean, his favorite species probably is the Yuma clapper rail. I want to just say that there are some other species of importance in the Delta too, and Carl mentioned the totuaba, the shrimp, the Corvina, and we recently have that picture of a beaver damaged one of the poles that we were going to plant. We haven't taken a picture of that beaver, but we at least saw signs of that, so that's a good thing. And I want to emphasize the Delta is also important for the people that live there and that depend on the resources that we still have in the Delta. And of course, the Kukapa, both in the U.S. side of the Delta by the limit of area, and the Kukapa in Mexico, their culture depends on the river. And if you talk to them, they will tell you if there is no river, there is no Kukapa. We spend a lot of time working with the Kukapa in the U.S. and Mexico and trying to implement different projects. And by the way, do I have a pointer here? She is a law professor from a new college in San Francisco, I think. And they visited the Delta last June. So it's with a group of about 10 students, I think it was. So it wasn't only just a law professor, a group of law students, but they visited Delta in June, which makes it a little more important because June is one of the hottest months in Mexicali or in the Delta. So, okay, this is the map of the 15 conservation priorities. And I want to use this map just to highlight when we say restoration of the Delta, I mean, what do we mean by that? You see two different colors on those areas. The red one, which refers more to areas that need conservation or protection. And kind of the blue color means areas that need restoration. It's not only that, I mean, they need conservation or restoration, but the emphasis is on either restoration, on conservation. Just want to point out that this is a riparian corridor over here. So it's in red, but meaning that it needs protection, but it was just difficult to show in the map that it really needs both restoration and conservation because out of the 33,000 hectares in that corridor, we only have maybe perhaps 4,000 in pretty good condition. So it really needs a lot of restoration. And the other area that needs restoration is here, the Rio Hardy over here. So the rest of the presentation, I will be presenting some of the progress made in restoration in the riparian corridor of the Colorado River and the Rio Hardy. Another question is this estuary portion of the Delta. So I won't be actually presenting anything on that, but there certainly is another component that needs restoration. Okay? Some of the things that when we started to look at the restoration in the Delta, I mean, if you talk to the National Water Commission in Mexico, they will tell you that they see the river, the need for the river is for flood control. And I will tell them, well, flood control, but we don't have water in the river, and we don't expect to have flows. But nevertheless, we actually together understand the need not only for improving the ecology of the river, but also kind of the need to provide flood control and protection for property and human lives. So restoration approach in the Delta considers that component, and again also considers a part on economic development or sustainable development. So we want to see a river where people could actually benefit from having water and a good habitat in the river. So those three components are, I mean, principles in this kind of the restoration strategy and implementation. Okay, so let's go to the Hardy River. And so far, in fact, after I joined the Sonoran Institute in 2002, kind of my first visit to the Delta after that was to plant kind of the first tree in the Rio Hardy in Campo Mosqueda. So that was in 2002. So we have been working in the Rio Hardy on restoration since, I mean, for the last 5 years. So in those 5 years, we have 36 acres planted in 7 different sites, 7 sites. And again, these are small sites. The larger one is Campo Mosqueda. In addition to planting trees, we actually, well, the community developed what we call a check dam here in this area over here, that allow to maintain the water levels or higher water levels in the Rio Hardy, and inundated about 2,500 acres of what used to be salt cedar, pretty much salt cedar. Now those 2,500 acres are in the process of becoming a marsh wetland. By the way, that area is what we call the Kidney area, or El Riñón in Spanish. And you can see in that picture some of the lagoons that are developing in that area. Okay, these are some of the examples in these restoration sites. Something I want to emphasize here is that for the last 5 years, we have our approach has been to demonstrate that restoration is feasible. So we have been involved in small restoration projects. Again, this one here, Campo Ramona, is only 1 hectare. Here in Campo Mosqueda, I think we have like 6 hectares. It's the largest one in the Rio Hardy. And over here, this should be Campo Muñoz, not Campo Mosqueda. That's another 1 hectare. Oh, and something I want to mention, these sites, every site, we have worked with the owners of those campos, or in this case, Germán Muñoz is the owner of Campo Muñoz, and they participated on the restoration project. In fact, in the design of the restoration project, and with the commitment to maintain and take care of the site after we plant the trees. And it has worked really good. After the first few projects in Rio Hardy, there was a lot of involvement from the communities, and now we're in the process of developing what we call the eco camp, or the Hardy River eco camp. And that's some of the concept that we are looking for to develop in that area. This area is owned by a local organization. Well, they have the concession of federal land for this area. It's a mile. Yeah, it's 1 mile or waterfront. So they have the concession, and in that area we're going to develop this Rio Hardy eco camp. But we are developing this with the help of students, and you can see, I think they are students from a local town not that far from this area, helping planting trees. And the picture over here are the law students that came. They came in June for a tour, and then they came back in January to spend 4 days helping us planting trees. So I really appreciate not only that they came, but they appreciate the work we are doing, and they kind of understand that planting 1 tree makes a difference there. You'll see, I don't know, you can see in the background here, all of that is salt cedar. So all of this area here used to be salt cedar like a year ago. And now we are just planting cottonwoods and willows. And something I want to say is that some of you that know about restoration may ask about the salinity of the Rio Hardy, and if that's good enough for cottonwoods and willows. And if you look at the books, it will tell you that no, it's not good for cottonwoods and willows, but at least for the last year or so, cottonwoods and willows are growing there. We planted poles of cottonwoods and willows a year ago, and they are growing alive. And this year we planted another 200 cottonwoods and willows poles, and we'll be planting trees in the spring. So the limitation of salinity in the Rio Hardy is at least right now is no longer a limitation. We'll see if the trees grow and are maintained, but at least for the first year, it's working pretty good. In terms of restoration in Mexico, at least in the Delta, it's quite different from what you do here in the U.S. I mean, if you're going to do a restoration project here, you call the nursery and ask 1,000 trees for next spring, and then they deliver the trees at your restoration site, and you just send a check or use your credit card. Well, in Mexico, it's not the case because there are no nurseries growing cottonwoods and willows. So we had to develop all of that in a nursery here in Campo Mosqueda. The owner of Campo Mosqueda allowed us to build the nursery there. It was first built in 2002, and then we had to rehabilitate that in last year. And so far we have produced about 5,000 trees or more. And some of these, you can see here, are cuttings of cottonwoods and willows, and here are more cuttings. Right now, I think we have the knowledge to do this, because it took us a little longer than for mesquite. Mesquite is pretty easy to grow mesquite, but cottonwoods and willows are more difficult. Anyway, the point here is that we are developing the whole process. And another thing I want to point out, she is Francis. She's from Mexicali. Actually, she lives pretty close to Campo Mosqueda, and she is the daughter of the person who used to be the president of this local organization, and now is working part-time with us, trying to taking care of the nursery. And this person here is Steve Handler. He's a student from Montana. He's been in the Delta for the last 7 months, I think. I'll be there, and he will be there until May. He's doing a master's degree over there, and so his project is a restoration project in the Delta. Okay, so you may think, what's the key thing in terms of restoration in the Rio Hardy? And I can tell you right now is water. Most of the water going into the Rio Hardy is agricultural return water. An average flow is about 21 acre-feet per year, coming from kind of the southwest portion of the irrigation district in Mexicali. The flow rate, the kind of average annual flow rate, it's almost 1 cubic meter per second, about close to 30 CFS, I think. Salinity is between 3 and 5 parts per thousand. See, the key issue here is that, as Jennifer mentioned, that water is not dedicated for the Rio Hardy. So, so how can we actually secure that water? So in addition to work with the National Water Commission to secure the water from return flows, we're also trying to present a proposal to the state of Baja California to dedicate water from the Las Arenitas treatment plant, which began operation about a month ago. And so we are trying to propose, or we are proposing that at least 0.8 cubic meters per second will be dedicated for the Rio Hardy. And if I go back to this graphic, so that water from the treatment plant will double the amount of water going to the Rio Hardy. And it will decrease salinity, maybe by close to a half of the existing salinity right now, because the water will be, from the plant, will be really good water. So that's something we are proposing right now, and working with the state of Baja California to dedicate that water for the Rio Hardy. Now, in terms of management of the land, so you need the restoration, you need the water, but you also need to provide for a good management of that land. So in the last year, we developed what we call a Rio Hardy management plan for the area. And also, we want to use another mechanism, that is to request concession of federal zone, and that is the 2,000 hectares shown here in this kind of dark green for the Rio Hardy. And 60 hectares of those have been already approved or concession to a local organization for conservation purposes. So there is a really good progress on that, and we are hoping that we could get these 2,000 hectares for conservation purposes. Okay, now in terms of the Colorado River, if we move to the Colorado River, I can tell you that until last year, most of the work in the Colorado River was about trying to learn more about the system, mainly about vegetation, about how birds are using or were using the habitat. But we didn't have any restoration or on-the-ground restoration activities until last year. And we defined this project that we call demonstration project. It's about almost 4,000 acres. For those of you that know the Delta, I don't know how many of you have been over there in the Delta in Mexico, maybe a few of you. I mean, we use as a reference there the San Felipito Bridge or the Railroad Bridge. That's a kind of common reference for people in Mexicali. And that bridge is over here, so kind of it's the north boundary of the demonstration site. And the southern boundary is what we call the Vado Carranza or the Carranza Road. So that's the demonstration site. Again, we spent a lot of time and resources trying to learn more about the hydrology, the soils, the vegetation, before we can actually start with on-the-ground restoration. So we have worked with farmers here to do pumping tests, just to look at, groundwater levels and kind of the dynamics of that. However, we couldn't, some of the approach that we are trying to implement, or we have, the principle that we have followed is to, okay, there is a need to get information. You need to develop restoration plans, but at the same time, if you wait to get all the information, then you could wait another 10 or 15 years. And so we decided to identify at least 2 restoration areas shown here, what we call Laguna Grande and Laguna Cori, as initial size to implement on-the-ground restoration. And in the meantime, we are actually continue with some of especially the groundwater model, to develop a detailed restoration plan. So again, this is the river again, the railroad bridge over here, and you can see that there is water there. And it's again careful, as I mentioned, that it's at that point during the picture it was taken last year. It's mainly water from kind of groundwater. It's not really a surface flow coming from to Morelos Dam. Although sometimes we have that, but most of the time here is just groundwater. Now you will see that this is a lagoon over here. That's what we call Laguna Grande. That used to be actually the main stem of the Colorado. That lagoon is probably about 6 meters in depth. So the main stem actually was like this over here, going this way. But of course, the National Water Commission developed what they call a pilot project or pilot channel, and changed the direction of the river. So just some numbers in terms of the underground restoration. So far, since October, well, since summer last year or fall last year, we have planted 15 acres, and that in this site over here, with 600 mesquite and about 350 poles of cottonwoods and willows. You know, that's something really good that we have in terms of cottonwoods and willows, that you could use poles. We call it estacas in Spanish. You just cut some of the poles available in the area and just plant the poles. And as soon as there is enough, the groundwater is there, or the moisture is there, they will grow. And by June, we want to complete another 10 acres, maybe with another 700 mesquite and 1,000 cottonwoods and willow trees. Some of the trees that you saw in the nursery are going to actually be planted in this site in the next few months. Okay, this is just a view from that Laguna Grande, or from that lagoon. This is the area over here. This picture is taken from the levee. And so this area over here is on the other side of this South Cedar and Mesquite. So this is the area. Some of the things that we have done here is we have kind of used an approach that instead of kind of using a big bulldozer and clear the site and then have it clean and then come and plant native vegetation, we have done more a selective kind of removal of South Cedar. And most of the work has been done by hand, by people. We have five people working in the area full time. Another thing that we have been doing here, and you will see most of my pictures show people doing something, because in most cases we have done this with collaboration from communities and students. You can see students here. I think they are the law students from New College. Some of you may recognize Juan Butron. He has worked a lot in the Cienega, but now is helping us here in the restoration side. So that's something we emphasize. We are trying to, outreach the community and create opportunities to participate. And this is just an example of the outreach activities in the Delta. Some numbers. In the last, I would say, 8 months, we have reached over 1,000 people. And that includes local government, state government, schools, like high schools in the area, farmers, fishermen. So it's a pretty intensive outreach campaign. And the nice thing about having on-the-ground restoration projects is that they participate in the projects. And in this case, at least 15% of them have been participating in these projects. And Sid, you can tell me, but you know how it makes a difference to visit the sites when you visit the Cienega about 2 years ago. So the same thing is happening here. You know, some of these farmers or the people here, you know, the elder people kind of remember how the river was like 30 or 40 years ago. But the young generations, they don't know about the river. They only kind of learn about the river when they go on Eastern to swim in the river here in San Felipito. But they don't have a clear picture of what it was many years ago. So the farmers are now participating, and in fact, one interesting comment in this meeting over here, one farmer mentioned to the group, well, how about if each farmer contributes with a little amount of water to dedicate to the river? And I can tell you that in the last year we have seen at least a change and a positive change in terms of people getting more involved and trying to restore or be part of the restoration of the river. Going back to some of the needs in terms of water needs, we have mentioned this today. There is an estimate of about 51,000 acre-feet of water, and that's what we consider the base flow. Okay. Last year, ProNatura, as another conservation organization in Mexico, acquired 320 acre-feet of water for restoration purposes. They have some funding to acquire another, I think, another 500 acre-feet or 600 acre-feet. So the process to secure water is there already. We have 320 acre-feet. We need 51,000, so we still, need to do a lot more. But what it showed that it can be done. That was the important part. It can be done. At the beginning, we were expecting a lot of kind of complaints or we didn't expect support from farmers, or we were expecting more kind of a negative attitude from farmers. But so far, it has been, all positive. And so they demonstrate that water can be actually acquired for conservation purposes. To be honest, in terms of that estimate, it's just based mainly on how vegetation has responded to flows. But at this time, we are trying to complete a groundwater model for the delta. And I just wanted to show that this kind of pink area will be kind of the boundary of the model. And the groundwater model is being developed by University of Arizona, and it will be completed in probably May. And it will help us to develop better estimates about water needs for the riparian corridor. I want to emphasize that these estimates are only for the riparian corridor or riparian vegetation or habitat. The estuary is a different a different thing, a different component. Okay, this morning there was a question about what Mexico is doing in terms of conservation or restoration of the delta. I just want to mention that in the last year, Mexico has been doing a lot of different things to protect and restore the delta in collaboration with NGOs, but Mexico is taking kind of the lead now with the new administration. I can tell you that the Secretary of the Environment was in the Delta in January, and Mexico is developing a strategy for the conservation of the Delta. So they are really taking the lead in this. And the National Water Commission is trying to dedicate flows for the Delta too. In fact, something that is, you may know this, but the Mexican water law established the ecological use as a consumptive use in the water law in Mexico. And the problem is that it hasn't been implemented in Mexico. And the Delta is now being seen by the federal government as a case study to start implementation of the water law with regards to securing stream flows. Okay, I almost finished here. I just want to give you an idea in terms of cost. To acquire and secure a base flow of 51,000 acre feet, we need $9 to $15 million. So 9 is if you buy it now, it will probably cost you $9 million. If you wait a little more, price will go up and maybe up to 15. In terms of underground restoration, and only looking at the cost of irrigation systems, the preparation of the site, the planting of the trees, the numbers that we have so far is about $2,400 per acre. I don't have the numbers for similar projects here in the U.S., but I think this is a lot cheaper than here in the U.S. Anyway, if you make the calculations, and this depends on how much restoration you want to do. If you say, okay, let's have a goal of 50,000 acres as a restoration goal, and then multiply that by 2,500, so you get the 120 million in terms of restoration costs for 50,000 acres. I know the MSCP, I don't know exactly what the number is, maybe 600 million over 15 years for 8,000 acres, I think. So here you get 50,000 with 120 million. If you add that, you add the cost of water, then it's 145 million. It's still a lot lower than the MSCP. Okay, just to finalize, in terms of the future of the Delta and some conclusions, we see restoration as a tool to enable communities to adapt to the changes. We think that this concept of resilience is not only applies for the environment, but also for the communities. They are adapting to the change, and I think we think that restoration is a tool that is allowing the communities to contribute and be part of the restoration. It's also a tool to link what is between science and management, because you can actually see things happening on the ground. So it's also really important for communities to see that. Well, I want to just jump to the second one there. In terms of water, I mean, water is key for restoration of the Delta. I mean, there is no question about that. However, we know that at least for the riparian corridor, we don't need that much water. A base flow of 51,000 acre feet per year, and then a pulse flow of 260 every 4 years. Okay. Oh, by the way, let me go back here. I'm sorry. If Mexico we secure these 51,000 acre feet, that's about 35% of the 1% of the annual flow. So Mexico will be putting like 35% of that 1% of the water that is needed. So I think it's very significant. For me, I always kind of present the idea that Mexico should be looking to secure this base flow. And I think it's possible, and we are going in that direction. Okay, just finalize this. Or something that we learned from the projects, and I mentioned this in the past, and to you may not seem as a really important issue, but the last bullet there, within demonstration or pilot projects are really important in terms of restoration in Mexico. Without those projects, we couldn't be able to tell if restoration is kind of feasible, not only from the technical component, but from a community component or a community participation. Okay, so just to go back and finalize in terms of the take-home messages that I hope you are getting from this presentation. So restoration in the Delta is feasible, not only at a small scale, but a large-scale restoration is feasible in the Delta and cost-effective. And again, requires some water, but not really a lot of water. And I just want to emphasize that community component is important. The people in the Delta is important to be part of this. And I want to say that in addition to that, in addition to the water, the collaboration, it needs a lot of passion and heart to leave a better Delta for the future generations. And I think we can do it together. Thank you. We have time for one or two questions. I know you're tired, but you're hungry. Oh.
I just had one. You showed a slide where you had put in cottonwoods and indicated the year before it was salt cedar or tamarisk.
Uh-huh.
So you've removed that. Do you have any feel for how successful you'll be able to be in establishing the cottonwoods and keeping the tamarisk out so that it doesn't reinvade?
That's a good question. The question is if by removing salt cedar, we have a good idea of the kind of the successful rate in terms of keeping salt cedar to coming back to the area. At this point, it's too early in the process because it has been only a year. We have been doing maintenance work, I don't want to say every month, but on a regular basis to clear the site from salt cedar. Within once the trees, cottonwoods and willows are bigger, that will help to keep, the reestablishing salt cedar in those areas. But we don't know that for sure. And by the way, in some of those areas, we can not use a bulldozer, so we are removing salt cedar by hand. And it's difficult, but at the same time provides opportunities for local people to find a job. As I said, we have five full-time jobs right now. Any other questions? You want a copy of the report? I have maybe 7 copies here, and I have maps, and so just stop by and. Well, the original idea was to only cover, for the groundwater model, to cover only the demonstration site. But the professors at the University of Arizona, as they were developing the model, identified the need to expand the boundary of the model to include a larger area, to be able for the model to be more precise in terms of the riparian corridor. So just to answer your question, it will include a good portion of the irrigation district, but it's designed to support restoration actions along the riparian corridor.